Think your retirement spending will drop year after year? Think again. JP Morgan analyzed 5 million retirees and uncovered a surprising trend that could upend your financial plans. Take one retiree, for example, who expected their expenses to shrink but instead faced rising healthcare costs and unexpected home repairs. This isn't an isolated case. Nearly every retiree encounters 3 major spending surprises that most advisors fail to mention. Today, I'm breaking down the real data behind these trends. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of what to expect and how to prepare for your future. The retirement lie you've been told. Financial advisors love showing that smooth downward slope. You know the one. It starts high when you retire and gently declines each year as you supposedly spend less. The problem? That chart is complete fiction when you look at real retiree data. Now, let's see the data that disproves these projections. JP Morgan tracked actual spending patterns across 5 million retirees, and what they found looks nothing like those tidy projections. Instead of a steady decline, real retirement spending has wild swings, sudden spikes, unexpected drops, and years where costs double out of nowhere. The average retirement plan misses this completely. Here's how the mismatch plays out. A typical advisor projection might show someone spending $60,000 their first year of retirement, then $58,000 the next, declining predictably each year. In reality, that same retiree might spend $75,000 in year 1, $82,000 in year 3, then drop to $50,000 after cutting back during a market crash. These aren't outliers. This is the norm. The consequences are serious. People relying on those smooth projections often run out of money when they hit their first big spending spike. Others end up overly frugal, missing out on early retirement years when they could have spent more. The entire system is built on flawed assumptions. Why does this happen? There are 3 distinct spending phases in retirement that completely break the steady decline model. The spending surge. New retirees often increase their costs by 20 to 30% as they travel, take up hobbies, and tackle delayed home repairs. This phase typically lasts 5 to 7 years. The volatile middle. Expenses swing wildly year to year, with unpredictable spikes like medical bills or home renovations. The late stage drop. Spending eventually declines, but often too late to offset earlier damage to your portfolio. Healthcare costs amplify the problem. That smooth advisor projection might budget $10,000 annually for medical expenses. Reality? One year it's $8,000, then $22,000 for a knee replacement, then back to $12,000. These unpredictable jumps make traditional budgeting unreliable. The late-stage spending drop does happen, but here's the catch. It often comes after your portfolio has already taken irreversible hits. By age 75 to 80, many retirees naturally slow down and spend less. But if you drained your savings too fast during those early active years, the late drop won't help you recover. Sequence of returns risk makes this even worse. A few bad market years early in retirement can devastate your portfolio when combined with that initial spending surge. The same market drops later in life matter far less. Timing becomes everything. Retirement calculators fail here too. They assume you'll spend the same amount, adjusted for inflation, every year. In reality, annual spending variations of 20 to 40% are normal. One year you're remodeling the kitchen. The next, you're staying home to babysit grandkids. The worst part, most retirees don't see these swings coming. They budget for smooth declines, then panic when real life hits. Some cut spending too drastically after a market drop, worsening their lifestyle unnecessarily. Others spend freely early on, not realizing how much those first 10 years matter. Surprise number 1, the early retirement spending spike. Here's the retirement spending surprise nobody tells you about. The first decade of retirement often costs more than your working years. Data shows retirees typically spend 20 to 30% more in their first 5 to 7 years compared to pre-retirement. This pattern isn't an anomaly, it's the norm. So, where does all that extra money go? Think of it as hitting the spending accelerator the moment you retire. Travel often takes the lead, with spending doubling in the first 2 years. That long-awaited European vacation or cross-country road trip suddenly becomes a top priority. Then there are hobbies, golf memberships, photography gear, or even a new boat. These leisure activities add up fast, with retirees spending an average of $8,000 more annually on them compared to their working years. Home improvements also surge, as retirees finally tackle those dream projects like kitchen remodels or patio upgrades. In fact, renovation spending jumps 40% in the first 3 years of retirement. And let's not forget, healthcare. Even with Medicare, out-of-pocket costs rise as retirees address deferred medical needs like dental work, knee replacements, or hearing aids. Consider this real case from a JP Morgan study. A couple retired at 65 with a $1.2 million portfolio, budgeting $60,000 annually based on pre-retirement spending. In year 1, they spent $78,000. By year 3, after an extended European tour, their costs hit $85,000. By year 5, a kitchen remodel and new RV pushed their spending to $92,000. Their portfolio took a $150,000 hit they hadn't anticipated. Another retiree planned to spend $45,000 annually, but ended up spending $71,000 in his first year. Thanks to a $12,000 road trip, $8,000 on photography equipment, and $6,000 in unexpected dental work. These aren't outliers. They're typical examples of how early retirement spending unfolds. Why does this catch so many people off guard? First, we underestimate how much free time costs. Those extra 40 hours a week often get filled with activities that come with hefty price tags. Second, retirees tend to justify big purchases as rewards for decades of hard work, like that $10,000 cruise or new RV. Third, healthcare surprises can hit harder when you're on a fixed income. This spending surge creates a dangerous mix when paired with sequence of returns risk. Imagine retiring during a market downturn. You're withdrawing more from shrinking investments at the worst possible time. For example, a $1 million portfolio with a 4% withdrawal rate means $40,000 annually. But if you spend 30% more, $52,000, in a down market, you've withdrawn 5.2% instead of 4%. Even if you cut back later, that early overspending compounds, making it harder for your portfolio to recover. But how does this surge affect your portfolio's long-term health? Stay tuned. The hidden danger nobody talks about. The 4% rule gets thrown around like gospel, but retire in the wrong year, and even 4% could bleed your portfolio dry. Sequence of returns risk means your retirement date alone can determine whether your savings last 30 years or 10. Here's a quick example to illustrate. 2 identical $1 million portfolios with 60/40th stock/bond splits. One retiree starts in 2000, right before the dot-com crash. The other retires in 2003, after markets recovered. Both follow the 4% rule, adjusting for inflation. By 2018, the 2000 retiree has $394,000 left, while the 2003 retiree has $1.6 million. Same strategy, same investments, completely different outcomes just 3 years apart. Why does this happen? Early market drops force you to sell more shares at depressed prices to maintain your spending. Those shares can't recover when markets bounce back. Imagine needing $40,000 annually from your $1 million portfolio. After a 20% market drop, your portfolio is now $800,000, but you still need $40,000. That's a 5% withdrawal instead of 4%, permanently increasing your burn rate. Now let's break it down further. Here's what happens in a bad sequence. Early market losses force higher withdrawals, locking in losses. Selling assets at depressed prices reduces future growth potential. Withdrawal rates climb above sustainable levels, often exceeding 6%. In contrast, a good sequence looks like this. Early market gains allow withdrawals without depleting principal. Portfolio growth outpaces spending, creating a buffer for future downturns. Withdrawal rates stay within sustainable limits, preserving long-term value. Real retirees face this constantly. A couple retiring in 2007 with $1.2 million saw their portfolio drop 37% in 2008 to 2009. They kept withdrawing $48,000 annually, selling assets at bottom prices. 12 years later, their portfolio was half its original value despite strong subsequent markets. Another couple retiring in 2011 with the same portfolio saw theirs grow to $1.9 million by 2023 using identical withdrawals. Combine this with the spending spike we discussed earlier. If you're withdrawing 25 to 30% more in early retirement during a market downturn, you're doubling the damage. That $1 million portfolio dropping to $800,000 now needs to cover $52,000 instead of $40,000, a 6.5% withdrawal rate. Portfolios rarely recover from sustained 6% plus withdrawals early in retirement. The worst part, you can't predict these sequences in advance. By the time you realize you're in a bad sequence, the damage is often irreversible. Your first 5 to 10 years of withdrawals determine your retirement's success more than any other factor. Flexibility becomes your only defense. Retirees who survive bad sequences do 3 things differently. Cut discretionary spending during market drops to avoid selling depressed assets. Keep cash reserves to cover 2 to 3 years of expenses, reducing the need to sell investments. Stay adaptable, working part-time or delaying Social Security to reduce early withdrawals. Consider this. 2 couples retired in 2007 with $1 million portfolios. The first rigidly followed the 4% rule, taking $40,000 annually. By 2022, they had $420,000 left and were cutting essentials. The second couple adjusted withdrawals, taking $35,000 in bad years and $45,000 in good ones. By 2022, they had $780,000 left with no lifestyle cuts. The solution isn't complicated, but requires discipline. Build a cash buffer, segment your portfolio, and accept that retirement spending must adapt to market conditions, especially in those critical first 10 years. Surprise number 2, the spending roller coaster. Retirement spending is like a roller coaster, unpredictable and full of ups and downs. It doesn't follow the gradual decline many people expect. Instead, it fluctuates wildly year to year, often by significant amounts. JP Morgan data reveals retirees frequently experience spending swings of 20 to 40% from one year to the next, making traditional retirement budgets nearly impossible to stick to. Take one retiree's spending pattern as an example. Year 1, $65,000. Year 2, $48,000 after cutting back on travel. Year 3, $72,000 for a new roof and dental implants. Year 4, $52,000. There's no steady downward trend, just constant fluctuation. In fact, about 60% of retirees see their spending change by more than 25% year over year, at least once every 5 years. These swings often stem from irregular, unavoidable expenses. One year, you might need a new car, $35,000. The next, you help a grandchild with college tuition, $15,000. Then there's the year your Medicare Part D deductible resets, just as you need costly prescriptions. Healthcare costs alone can vary by over $10,000 annually for the same person. Home maintenance is another major culprit. While the average retiree spends $3,000 annually on home repairs, some years bring big-ticket surprises like a $12,000 HVAC system or a $15,000 roof replacement. These aren't optional expenses, yet most budgets treat them as predictable monthly costs. The reality? You might spend nothing for years, then face a $20,000 bill. Family obligations add another layer of unpredictability. One retiree shared how they spent $8,000 helping an adult child with medical bills, while another paid $12,000 for a grandchild's emergency dental work. These costs don't show up in retirement planning spreadsheets, but they're common enough to derail even the most careful budgets. Even routine categories fluctuate. Travel spending might hit $15,000 one year for an Alaskan cruise, then drop to $2,000 the next when you stay home. Hobbies follow a similar pattern, $5,000 for new golf clubs one year, $500 the next. These aren't minor variations, they're complete budget overhauls. This unpredictability highlights why traditional fixed budgets fail. Imagine planning for $60,000 annually, adjusted for 2% inflation. Real spending might look more like $85,000, $52,000, $63,000, and $78,000 over 4 years. That safe $60,000 target misses both the highs and lows. One retiree described how this volatility created constant stress. One year, I worried about overspending. The next, I was cutting essentials to recover. It felt like I could never get ahead. This emotional toll is common, even for those with adequate savings. The solution isn't stricter budgeting, it's building flexibility into your plan. Successful retirees use 3 key strategies. First, They maintain cash reserves equal to 2 to 3 years of expenses to smooth out spikes. Second, they separate essential and discretionary spending. Third, they adjust withdrawals based on portfolio performance. For example, instead of rigidly withdrawing $60,000 annually, you might take $45,000 in good years and $75,000 in bad ones. This approach keeps your average near the target while avoiding forced investment sales during downturns. Another tactic is dedicating specific assets to different needs. Keep home repair funds in short-term bonds. Use an HSA for healthcare costs. Cover basic living expenses with Social Security and annuity income. This prevents one large expense from derailing your entire plan. The most important shift is psychological. Accept that retirement spending will be unpredictable. Build a plan that expects volatility rather than fighting it. Retirees who embrace this reality and plan for it feel more secure and less stressed, no matter what surprises come their way. The healthcare time bomb. Guess what the single biggest budget buster in retirement is? Healthcare costs blow everything else out of the water, growing faster than inflation every single year. The average 65-year-old couple will spend $315,000 on medical expenses in retirement, and that's just the predictable costs. Medicare doesn't cover nearly as much as people think. Basic Part B premiums run about $2,000 annually per person, but that's just the start. Add in Part D prescription coverage, $500 plus yearly, supplemental insurance, $1,500 to $3,000 annually, and you're already spending $6,000 to $10,000 per couple before any actual medical care. Then come the deductibles. $1, $600 per hospital stay under Part A, $240. Yearly under Part B, plus drug plan deductibles. The real shock comes from what Medicare doesn't cover at all. Dental work, not included. A single implant can cost $3,000 to $5,000. Hearing aids, $1,500 to $7,000 per pair, replaced every 3 to 5 years. Long-term care. Medicare covers exactly 0 days of nursing home care unless you meet strict rehabilitation criteria. A private room in a nursing facility averages $108,000 annually. These gaps in coverage can feel like an unexpected financial earthquake, shaking even the most carefully laid plans. Healthcare costs accelerate with age 2. A 65-year-old might spend $6,000 annually on medical expenses. By 75, that jumps to $9,000. At 85, it's $14,000. These increases compound year after year, often when your portfolio can least afford it. Healthcare spending grows at 5 to 7% annually, nearly double general inflation. Consider these real examples. One retiree budgeted $8,000 annually for healthcare, only to need knee replacement surgery. The bill, $25,000 after Medicare and supplemental insurance. Another couple planned for $12,000 yearly medical costs. When one developed diabetes and the other needed cataract surgery, their actual expenses hit $38,000 that year. These spikes are impossible to predict, but happen when least convenient. Early retirement makes this even riskier. Retire at 62 instead of 65, and you're on the hook for 3 extra years of private insurance before Medicare kicks in. A couple buying ACA coverage could easily spend $24,000 annually pre-Medicare. That's $72,000 extra just to bridge the healthcare gap. Enough to drain many retirement accounts before they even start. Long-term care is the ultimate wild card. 70% of retirees will need some form of long-term care, with women typically requiring 3.7 years and men 2.2 years. At $54,000 annually for assisted living or $108,000 for a nursing home, these costs can obliterate even sizable nest eggs. Most retirement plans completely ignore this reality. Traditional retirement planning fails spectacularly here. Most calculators assume healthcare costs rise smoothly with inflation. Reality looks nothing like that. You might have 5 normal years followed by one that triples your medical spending. The averages work out on paper, but the actual experience is financial whiplash. Solutions exist, but they require proactive planning. Health savings accounts, HSAs, offer triple tax advantages if funded during working years. Just $3,000 annually invested at age 40 grows to about $250,000 by 65, assuming 7% returns. enough to cover many healthcare surprises. Long-term care insurance, while expensive, can cap potential nursing home costs. Strategic timing helps too. Delaying retirement from 62 to 65 saves those 3 years of expensive pre-Medicare coverage. Working part-time with health benefits can bridge the gap. Even staying active and healthy directly reduces medical costs. The most fit retirees spend 30% less on healthcare than their peers. The smartest retirees segment their healthcare funds. They keep one pool for predictable premiums, another for unexpected costs, and a third for potential long-term care. This prevents one major medical event from forcing bad investment sales. Some even dedicate specific income streams like annuity payments to cover baseline medical expenses. Surprise number 3, the late-stage spending drop that comes too late. The data confirms retirement spending eventually drops, but there's a catch. This decline typically doesn't happen until age 75 to 80, often too late to save damaged portfolios. That golden period of lower expenses arrives after your nest egg may already be beyond repair. JP Morgan's study shows average spending drops 25 to 30% after age 75. People travel less, downsize homes, and generally slow down. But by the time this happens, your portfolio may have already taken irreversible hits from early overspending and market downturns. Here's how it plays out. A couple retires at 65 spending $70,000 annually. They maintain this level through their active 60s, even during a market crash at 68. By 75, they naturally cut back to $50,000 as they travel less. But those first 10 years of higher withdrawals, combined with poor market returns, have already drained their portfolio below recovery levels. Think of it like trying to refill a leaking bucket. A $1 million portfolio with 50-50 stocks and bonds can't recover if you withdraw 5% annually during early retirement while markets drop 20%. Even if you slash spending later, the damage compounds too quickly. By 75, your portfolio might be down to $400,000, too small to sustain even reduced spending for 20+ more years. Real retiree cases show this pattern repeatedly. One couple spent $72,000 annually until age 78, then cut back to $52,000. But their portfolio had already dropped from $1.2 million to $650,000. Even with reduced spending, they ran out of money by 85. Another retiree maintained $60,000 withdrawals until 76, then dropped to $40,000. His $900,000 portfolio had shrunk to $380,000, insufficient to last. This is why so many retirees face financial trouble in their 80s. They assume spending less later will offset earlier excesses, but portfolio math doesn't work that way. Early withdrawals have outsized impacts because they occur when your nest egg is largest. A 5% withdrawal from $1 million, $50,000, hurts far more than 5% from $500,000, $25,000 later. The sequence risk we discussed earlier magnifies this effect. Bad early market returns combined with typical spending levels create holes too deep for later cuts to fix. Imagine retiring in 2000 with $1 million. Even if you reduced spending by 30% in 2010, the damage from the first decade's withdrawals during the dot-com bust and financial crisis was already done. Healthcare costs complicate things further. While overall spending drops after 75, medical expenses rise. You might spend less on travel but more on prescriptions, home health aids, and Medicare premiums. This offsets some of the spending decline, especially for those with chronic conditions. The solution isn't to avoid spending in early retirement. Those are often your best years. Instead, build flexibility into withdrawals. Take 4% in good years, but 3% after market drops. Keep cash reserves to avoid selling investments during downturns. Consider part-time work early on to reduce portfolio withdrawals. Some retirees use front-loading strategies, spending more initially while healthy, then planning explicit reductions at 70 or 75. One couple budgeted $75,000 until 70, $60,000 until 75, then $45,000 after. Their planned reductions helped preserve capital. The key takeaway: late life spending drops won't save you if you've already over-withdrawn early on. Your portfolio's fate is largely sealed in the first 10 to 15 years of retirement. By the time you naturally spend less, it's often too late to recover. Why your retirement calculator is lying to you. Every retirement calculator you've ever used is lying to you. Not intentionally, but because they're all built on the same flawed assumptions. They show smooth, predictable spending curves that look nothing like how real people spend money in retirement. Plug $1 million into any basic calculator, and you'll see something like this. Year 1, $40,000. Year 2, $40,800 with inflation. Year 3, $41,616, and so on. But real retiree spending looks more like this. Year 1, $52,000. Year 2, $47,000. Year 3, $61,000. Year 4, $39,000. The swings are wild, and no calculator accounts for them. Why? Because these tools assume every expense category changes at the same steady rate. In reality, healthcare jumps unpredictably, travel comes in bursts, and home repairs hit in lump sums. One year, you might spend $800 on healthcare, and the next $12,000 for surgery. Calculators average this out to $6,400 annually, which doesn't help when the big bill arrives. Early retirement costs are another blind spot. Most calculators assume you'll spend less than when working, but data shows the opposite. People typically spend 20 to 30% more in the first 5 to 7 years. That $60,000 pre-retirement budget often becomes $75,000 to $78,000 initially. Calculators projecting $55,000 are off by 35% right from the start. Here's a quick comparison of what calculators assume versus reality. Spending patterns. Calculators show smooth, gradual increases. Real spending is unpredictable and spiky. Early retirement costs. Calculators predict lower spending. Real data shows a 20 to 30% increase. Healthcare. Calculators use generic inflation rates. Real costs grow at double inflation and spike unpredictably. Long-term care. Often ignored by calculators, but 70% of retirees will need it, with costs exceeding $100,000 annually. Taxes. Calculators assume static rates, ignoring how withdrawals impact Medicare premiums and Social Security taxation. Can you afford to rely on averages when reality is so volatile? Sequence of returns risk is another area that calculators oversimplify. They might show your portfolio surviving 95% of historical scenarios, but they don't account for how real spending spikes during market downturns make sequences worse. That 95% success rate can drop to 70% when actual spending behavior is factored in. Here's a real example. A couple with $1.2 million used a popular tool that said they could safely spend $48,000 annually. Their actual first 5 years? $62,000, $58,000, $71,000, $49,000, $67,000. By year 5, their portfolio was $200,000 below projections because the calculator didn't account for real spending patterns. Better tools exist, but they're harder to find. Look for planners that model spending in distinct categories: healthcare, leisure, housing. Allow for unpredictable spikes in each category. Factor in sequence risk with real spending behaviors. Include long-term care scenarios. Show year-by-year tax impacts. Monte Carlo simulations can help, but only if they use realistic spending inputs. A good simulation will show not just whether you might run out of money, but when and why. Maybe healthcare costs drain you at 82, or maybe early overspending creates problems at 72. This specificity matters. The solution isn't abandoning calculators, it's using better ones. Look for tools that let you input separate spending categories. Allow for different inflation rates per category. Model irregular large expenses. Show year-by-year cash flow, not just end balances. Include tax consequences. Some financial advisors have access to these advanced tools, but you can find decent ones online if you look past the basic rule in the real world. The key is finding something that acknowledges retirement spending isn't smooth. Take out 4% of your portfolio the first year, adjust for inflation after that, and your money should last 30 years. But real retirement spending makes this rule dangerously flawed. JP Morgan's data shows why this one-size-fits-all approach fails when faced with actual retiree behavior. Here's why the 4% rule cracks under pressure. It assumes your spending increases smoothly with inflation each year. In reality, spending is unpredictable. For example, retirees often splurge early on bucket list trips or home upgrades, then cut back later. Imagine spending $52,000 in year one of retirement instead of $40,000, then facing a market downturn. Even if you reduce spending later, the damage to your portfolio is already done. Consider two retirees with $1 million portfolios who retired in 2000. One follows the 4% rule rigidly, withdrawing $40,000 annually adjusted for inflation. The other spends more in the early years, $52,000 in year one, $47,000 in year two, and $61,000 in year three, reflecting real retiree behavior. By 2018, the first retiree has $394,000 left, while the second has just $217,000. Same markets, same starting amount, but vastly different outcomes. Healthcare costs amplify the problem. The 4% rule might budget $10,000 annually for medical expenses, but a single year with $28,000 in bills can push your withdrawal rate to 6.8%. These outlier years are common, yet the rule doesn't account for them. Sequence risk makes things worse. Retiring in a bad year like 2000 or 2008 and sticking to 4% withdrawals during a market crash can drain your portfolio quickly. Historical averages don't reflect how real people spend during downturns, often more, as they have time to travel or tackle projects while markets are down. The 4% rule's success rate drops significantly when you factor in real spending patterns. While historical simulations show a 95% success rate, adding early spending spikes, healthcare surprises, and lumpy expenses reduces it to about 70%. That means 3 in 10 retirees could run out of money. Some retirees get lucky, retiring in a bull market with no major health issues, but luck isn't a strategy. When the 4% rule fails, here's what you can do instead. Flexible withdrawal strategies adapt to real-world volatility. One option: withdraw 4% of your current portfolio balance each year instead of adjusting for inflation. This way, you take more in good years and less in bad years, automatically aligning with market conditions. Another approach is segmenting your spending. Cover essentials with guaranteed income sources like Social Security or annuities, and use portfolio withdrawals only for discretionary expenses you can cut if needed. This prevents being forced to sell investments during downturns. The guardrail method works well too. Set upper and lower withdrawal limits, say 3.5% to 5.5% annually. When markets drop, you take the minimum. When they soar, you can splurge a little. This built-in flexibility mirrors real retirement needs. Some retirees use time-based rules, withdrawing more, say 5%, during the first active decade of retirement, then scaling back to 3.5% as they slow down. This matches spending to retirement phases instead of assuming it's constant. Cash reserves are another safeguard. Keeping 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash lets you avoid selling investments during market crashes, giving your portfolio time to recover. The best plans combine these strategies. For example, you might use guardrails for portfolio withdrawals, segment essential expenses, and keep cash buffers. This multi-layered approach handles real-world volatility far better than any single rule. The two retirees who did everything right, but got very different results. Let me introduce you to two retirees, Bob and Jim. Both had $1.2 million portfolios, invested 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds, and planned to spend $48,000 annually following the 4% rule. But their retirements couldn't have been more different. Bob retired in 1999, Jim in 2002. Just 3 years apart, yet their outcomes were worlds apart. Bob was a cautious, by-the-book planner who stuck rigidly to his retirement strategy. Unfortunately, his retirement began with the dot-com crash. His $1.2 million dropped to $960,000 in the first year. He still withdrew $48,000, selling investments at a loss. Then 9/11 hit, and markets fell again. By 2002, his portfolio was down to $820,000. He kept withdrawing the same amount, adjusted for inflation, locking in losses. The 2008 financial crisis was the final blow. By 2010, his portfolio had dwindled to $490,000. At 75, Bob was cutting back on essentials just to get by. Jim, on the other hand, was more adaptable. He retired in 2002 after markets had recovered. His first few years saw solid returns, and by 2007, His portfolio had grown to $1.4 million despite his withdrawals. When the 2008 crash hit, he had a cushion to weather the storm. By 2018, Jim's portfolio was still at $1.1 million. While Bob was skipping medications to save money, Jim was enjoying European cruises. The difference wasn't skill or planning, it was timing. Bob's first decade saw two major crashes just as he started withdrawing. Jim's first decade had strong returns that built a buffer. Same strategy, same spending goals, but completely different outcomes. Sequence of returns explains this perfectly. Bob had to sell shares at depressed prices to fund his early retirement, leaving fewer shares to recover when markets rebounded. Jim's early withdrawals came from gains, not principal, allowing his portfolio to grow even as he spent. But spending patterns also played a role. Bob spent $62,000 his first year on a new RV and dental work, while Jim spent $52,000 on a European trip. Those early overages hurt Bob much more during market drops. Healthcare costs widened the gap too. Bob needed $18,000 for knee surgery in 2005, withdrawing from a depressed portfolio. Jim had the same surgery in 2010, but his portfolio had recovered, so the impact was smaller. Small behavioral differences mattered as well. Jim kept 2 years of cash reserves, so he didn't have to sell investments during the 2008 crash. Bob had no buffer and sold at the bottom. Jim also worked part-time for his first 3 years, covering 30% of his expenses without touching his portfolio. The lessons are clear. Your retirement date matters more than you think. Flexibility beats rigid rules. Jim adjusted spending in bad years, while Bob stuck to his plan. Cash reserves prevent selling low. And part-time work early on can reduce portfolio stress. Most importantly, identical plans can succeed or fail based on factors outside your control. Build buffers and flexibility into your strategy. Assume you might retire in a bad year like Bob did, and plan accordingly. The spending category that will shock you. Think you've got retirement spending figured out? Guess which category tops grocery bills for many retirees. Pets. That's right. Retirees spend an average of $1,200 annually on their furry friends, compared to $900 on groceries. And for some, the costs climb even higher. Between $800 vet bills, $400 for premium food, and $300 for grooming, pet expenses add up fast. Then there are surprises, like the $2,500 knee surgery Fido needed, or the $8,000 specialized dog wheelchair. One couple even spent $15,000 converting their sunroom into a cat paradise. These aren't minor indulgences, they're major budget items that most retirement plans overlook. Hobbies and passions can also derail budgets. That woodworking shop, $3,000 to set up, plus $1,500 annually. Golf, $4,000 a year at a decent club. One retiree spent $18,000 converting his garage into a home brewery, while another dropped $25,000 on photography gear over 5 years. These aren't frivolous splurges, they're meaningful pursuits that cost more than expected. Family expenses are another hidden drain. Adult children often rely on retirees for financial help, with 40% of retirees giving an average of $5,000 annually. Some costs are predictable, like $3,000 for a grandchild's braces or $2,500 toward a car down payment. Others come out of nowhere, like the $12,000 bail money one retiree paid for his 32-year-old son. Grandkids add to the mix, too. Beyond gifts, retirees often fund private school, $8,000 annually, summer camps, $2,500, or college savings, $5,000 yearly. One grandfather paid $15,000 for orthodontic work, while another couple covers $12,000 annually in preschool costs. These expenses bring joy, but can wreck even the most carefully planned budgets. Technology costs also catch retirees off guard. A new iPhone every 2 years, $800, premium cable, $1,800 annually, and smart home upgrades, $3,000, add up quickly. One tech-savvy retiree spends $5,000 annually on the latest gadgets, while another paid $10,000 to wire his home for smart devices. These costs barely existed for previous generations, but are now common. Home modifications become necessary but expensive. A $12,000 stairlift, $8,000 walk-in tub, or $5,000 for grab bars and railings may not qualify as medical expenses, but they're essential for aging in place. One couple spent $25,000 making their home wheelchair accessible after a stroke. These costs hit just as incomes become fixed. The solution isn't cutting these meaningful expenses, it's planning for them. Start by tracking your current surprise spending. Add 25% for retirement, when you'll have more time for hobbies and family. Create separate savings buckets for pets, grandkids, and passions so these costs don't blindside you. Consider syncing funds, setting aside $200 monthly for pet care or $300 for family gifts. Insurance helps too. Pet insurance, at $50 monthly, can cover major vet bills. Long-term care insurance might prevent home modification costs from draining your portfolio. Umbrella policies protect when helping adult children financially. The key is recognizing that retirement spending often revolves around what truly matters to you. Those extras can become the main expenses. Your budget needs to reflect that, whether it's spoiling grandkids, pampering pets, or pursuing passions. How much should you really have saved? You've probably heard those standard retirement savings targets. Save 10x your salary by 67, or have $1 million for a comfortable retirement. Those numbers sound nice and round, but they're based on outdated assumptions about retirement spending. When you factor in the actual spending patterns we've covered, those targets fall dangerously short. Let's break it down. The $1 million target assumes you'll withdraw $40,000 annually, 4% rule. But retirees often spend 25% more in early retirement. That $40,000 becomes $50,000, pushing your withdrawal rate to 5%. This increases the risk of running out of money. Your $1 million now has a 40% chance of depleting too soon. Healthcare costs add to the challenge. Traditional targets budget around $10,000 annually for medical expenses, but real data shows the average 65-year-old couple spends $12,000 yearly now, rising to $30,000 plus later. Home maintenance is another blind spot. Standard plans might allocate $3,000 annually, but retirees often face $15,000 plus lump sums for new roofs, HVAC systems, or accessibility upgrades. Spread over 30 years, that's $5,000 plus annually, far more than most plans account for. Then there are surprise expenses. $1,200 annually for pets, $5,000 helping adult kids, $4,000 plus for hobbies. These extras can easily add $10,000 plus yearly to your budget. Suddenly, that $1 million is supporting $70,000 in annual spending, not $40,000. Think of retirement savings like a financial thermostat. If the temperature rises, like with early retirement spending spikes or unexpected costs, you need to adjust the thermostat to maintain comfort. For a middle-class couple wanting to maintain their lifestyle, $1.8 million is the new $1 million. Want to travel more or help grandkids? You're looking at $2.2 million plus. Single retirees need about 65% of these amounts, but the same principles apply. The early retirement spike alone adds 20 to 30% to savings needs. If you plan to spend $60,000 annually, you'll actually need $75,000 plus for those first 7 years. That's an extra $105,000 in savings just for the initial surge. Healthcare costs now average $387,000 per couple over a lifetime, nearly double what most retirement targets account for. Here's how this plays out in real numbers. Say you're retiring at 65 and want $60,000 annual income. Traditional calculators suggest $1.5 million. But factoring in 28% higher spending in the first 7 years, $76,800 annually. Healthcare averaging $16,000 yearly. $8,000 annually for home/auto surprises. $7,000 for pets, family, and hobbies. Your actual annual spending is $107,800 initially, then $91,000 later. You'd need $2.4 million for the same safety margin, 60% more than the standard target. Even with Social Security, most people are undersaving by hundreds of thousands. So how do you bridge the gap? Adjust your savings targets using realistic spending estimates, not generic rules. If you're 55 with $500,000 and need $1.8 million, You'll need to save $3,000 monthly for 10 years at 6%. Tough, but possible with drastic cuts or income boosts. Working 3 extra years makes a huge difference. Delaying retirement from 62 to 65 reduces savings needs by 30%. Part-time work in early retirement can cover spending spikes without tapping savings. Strategic withdrawals, like basing them on portfolio value, 3 to 5%, help preserve funds during market downturns. And creating multiple income streams, like rental properties or side gigs, diversifies risks and reduces how much you need to save. The working retiree paradox. Here's why so many retirees are going back to work. Nearly 40% of retirees return to the workforce within 18 months, but only about half do it by choice. The rest are forced back because their retirement plans didn't account for real-world spending surprises. The data shows a clear pattern. Retirees relying solely on savings often face shortfalls when unexpected costs arise. It could be an $18,000 roof replacement or a $25,000 medical bill Medicare didn't cover. Suddenly, that carefully calculated 4% withdrawal rate isn't enough, and part-time work becomes a necessity. Take this example from a JP Morgan study. A couple retired at 65 with $900,000, planning to withdraw $36,000 annually. But their spending spiked, $52,000 in the first year, $48,000 the next. By year 5, they had withdrawn $230,000 instead of the planned $180,000. A market downturn forced them to work 20 hours a week to avoid depleting their portfolio. Part-time work can address these challenges. Earning even $15,000 annually can significantly reduce withdrawals, cutting them nearly in half if you were taking $36,000. It also provides flexibility for unexpected expenses, like an $8,000 vet bill, without derailing your finances. Timing is critical. Earning income during the first 5 to 7 years of retirement has an outsized impact. This is when sequence risk is highest, and spending tends to be elevated. Studies show that working just 10 hours weekly during early retirement can reduce portfolio failure rates by 30%. Waiting until your 70s to work offers far less benefit. Some retirees approach this strategically. A former teacher tutors online 15 hours weekly, earning $18,000 annually to fund their travel budget. A retired engineer consults 2 days a month, bringing in $12,000 to cover healthcare costs. These aren't full-time jobs. They're targeted income streams designed to solve specific financial challenges. The benefits extend beyond money. Work provides social connections and mental stimulation that many retirees miss. Studies show retirees working 10 to 15 hours weekly report higher life satisfaction than both full-time workers and full-time retirees. The key is finding work that fits your skills without becoming stressful. One retiree shared their success story. I started teaching piano lessons a few hours a week. It's not just extra income. It's a way to stay connected and share my passion. I feel more fulfilled now than I did in my career. Here's how to make it work. First, identify your biggest spending categories, like travel or hobbies, and find part-time work to fund them. A photography enthusiast might sell prints online to pay for new equipment. A food lover could lead culinary tours to cover dining expenses. This creates a direct link between work and lifestyle. Second, consider timing. Working during the first few retirement years can be especially impactful. Every dollar earned is one less withdrawn from your portfolio during its most vulnerable period. Even delaying retirement by 6 to 12 months while working part-time can significantly improve outcomes. Finally, get creative with income streams. Rent out a spare bedroom occasionally, or monetize a hobby like woodworking or writing. The goal isn't to rebuild your career. It's to create flexible income that supplements your savings without taking over your time. Retirees who plan for part-time work have 25% higher success rates than those relying solely on savings. They're better prepared for unexpected costs and can maintain financial stability while enjoying a more fulfilling retirement. The one chart that changes everything. Here's the chart that will completely change how you think about retirement spending. JP Morgan's study of 5 million retirees produced one visualization that challenges everything traditional retirement planning assumes. Ready? Take a moment to picture what you've been told: steady, predictable spending that gently declines over time. Now imagine the opposite. The chart reveals retiree spending isn't a smooth downward slope. It's a jagged roller coaster of spikes and drops. Spending fluctuates wildly, 20%, 30%, even 40%, from one year to the next. One year it's a dream vacation, the next it's a market crash, then a new roof. There's no pattern, no predictability, just constant volatility that most retirement calculators ignore. One of the most surprising insights? The early retirement spending surge. The data shows a clear spike in the first 5 to 7 years, with expenses jumping 20 to 30% above pre-retirement levels. That's the opposite of what most advisors tell you. They assume you'll spend less after you stop working. But the reality? You'll likely spend more, right when your portfolio is most vulnerable to market downturns. Then there's healthcare. The chart shows medical costs don't rise steadily. They explode unpredictably. One year it's $8,000 for routine care. The next it's $25,000 for surgery. These spikes don't follow market trends or careful budgeting. They happen when they happen, and they can derail rigid withdrawal plans. The late-stage spending drop is there too, but it starts far later than most models predict. Instead of beginning at 65, the decline doesn't kick in until 75 or 80. By then, if you've overspent early or faced bad markets, it's often too late to recover. The chart highlights retirees who cut back at 75 but still ran out of money by 85 because the damage was done years earlier. This volatility isn't rare, it's the norm. The data shows 60% of retirees experience at least one 25% spending swing every 5 years. Some years you're remodeling the kitchen, others you're staying home to babysit grandkids. On average, retiree spending varies by 20 to 40% annually, yet most plans assume a steady 2 to 3% inflation-adjusted increase. That's not planning, that's wishful thinking. The chart also exposes how sequence risk interacts with real spending. Bad market years early in retirement are devastating when paired with spending spikes. Identical portfolios can succeed or fail based solely on whether big expenses hit during downturns. Retirees who spent heavily in 2008 never recovered, while those who cut back temporarily thrived. So, what can you do? First, throw out smooth spending projections. Your plan needs to account for volatility, big ups and downs, not steady declines. Build buffers for unexpected costs. Keep 2 to 3 years of cash, so you're not forced to sell investments during market drops. Second, plan for the spending spike. Budget 25 to 30% more for the first 5 to 7 years of retirement. If you think you'll spend $60,000 annually, plan for $75,000 initially. The data shows this isn't optional, it's reality. Third, segment your spending. Separate essentials like housing and food from discretionary expenses like travel. When markets drop, cut back on discretionary spending first. Retirees who do this weather downturns far better than those who make across-the-board cuts. Finally, stay flexible. Rigid withdrawal rules fail. Instead of taking 4% every year, adjust based on market conditions. Take less in bad years. Why retirement feels more expensive than working. The retirees who adapted survived. Here's why retirement often ran out of more expensive than your working years, even when you're spending less. When you were working, a steady paycheck created the illusion of stability. In retirement, every dollar spent feels like it's coming directly from your life savings, and that changes everything. The unpredictability of expenses in retirement creates constant low-level stress, even for those with adequate savings. One month you're fine, the next you're writing a $15,000 check for a new roof. This uncertainty weighs heavily, making even a healthy portfolio feel fragile. Spending in retirement isn't just about managing money. It's about managing the emotional toll of unpredictability. Here's what's really happening. During your career, fixed costs like commuting, work clothes, and lunches out quietly drained your paycheck. In retirement, those costs disappear, but they're replaced by discretionary spending that feels more voluntary, and therefore more guilt-inducing. That $8,000 cruise seems extravagant when it's coming from savings rather than a paycheck you'll get again next month. The psychology of withdrawal is different too. Spending in retirement feels like burning precious fuel. One retiree described it this way. At work, I'd spend $100 without thinking. Now I debate every $20 purchase because it's my money leaving forever. This shift makes every expense feel weightier, even when it's planned. Spending volatility amplifies this emotional strain. Retirees describe whiplash from alternating between "I'm spending too much" and "I can't afford this." One year you're on a European tour, the next you're postponing dental work after a market drop. This roller coaster is exhausting, even if your long-term finances are sound. Fixed costs, like housing and insurance, also feel heavier in retirement. One retiree shared, "Seeing $3,000 leave my account each month for basics makes me feel poor, even though I spent more unconsciously when working." The visibility of these expenses adds to the mental burden. Healthcare costs hit differently too. At work, employer plans buffered the sticker shock. Now you see every premium, copay, and denied claim. A retiree shared, "I nearly cried when Medicare rejected my $4,000 physical therapy bill. That never happened with my corporate insurance." The transition from accumulation to decumulation messes with your head. For decades, watching your savings grow felt rewarding. Now, watching the balance shrink triggers loss aversion. Psychologically, losing $10,000 hurts more than gaining $10,000 pleases. The loss of future earning potential changes everything. At 50, a big expense meant working longer or harder. At 70, that option fades, making every dollar feel more precious. As one retiree put it, "I used to think I'll earn more. Now I know this is all I've got." Here's how to fix the mindset. First, reframe withdrawals as paychecks. Set up automatic monthly transfers equal to your old take-home pay. One retiree said this simple trick cut her money anxiety in half. Second, bucket your spending. Keep essentials in safe investments, discretionary money in growth assets. Knowing your basics are covered reduces stress about market swings. Third, normalize volatility. Track your spending in 3-year averages, not month to month. This smooths out the mental impact of big-ticket years. Fourth, create spending guardrails. Set clear limits for good and bad years. For example, in up markets, I'll spend up to $70,000. In downturns, I'll cut to $50,000. Having rules reduces decision fatigue. Fifth, separate one-time hits from ongoing costs. That $15,000 roof isn't spending, it's capital maintenance. Fund these separately so they don't distort your perception of daily expenses. The 3 retirement spending phases and how to survive them. Retirement spending isn't one long gradual decline. It's 3 distinct phases, each requiring its own strategy. Let's break them down and explore how to plan for each. Phase 1. The spending surge, ages 60 to 70. This phase begins right after retirement, when spending typically spikes by 20 to 30% compared to your working years. Travel, hobbies, and home projects often drive these costs. For example, one couple spent $20,000 annually on travel during their first 5 years of retirement, compared to $5,000 before retiring. To prepare, set aside extra cash specifically for this phase. Consider part-time work to fund discretionary expenses without tapping into investments. Most importantly, don't panic if you overspend early on. It's normal, but you need to plan for it. Sequence risk is a major concern here. Poor market returns combined with high withdrawals can permanently damage your portfolio. Protect yourself by maintaining cash reserves and cutting back on non-essential spending during downturns. For instance, a couple who reduced their travel budget from $15,000 to $5,000 during the 2008 crash preserved their portfolio while others struggled later. Phase 2, the roller coaster years, ages 70 to 80. Spending during this phase becomes unpredictable, with large, irregular expenses like a $15,000 car purchase one year and a $25,000 kitchen remodel the next. Traditional fixed budgets often fail here. Instead, build flexibility into your plan. Keep 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash to avoid selling investments during market downturns. Segment your portfolio to ensure you're not forced to sell stocks at a loss. For example, one retiree avoided financial strain by using a bucket strategy, keeping cash for short-term needs and stocks for long-term growth. Accept that volatility is normal. Don't make drastic cuts after one expensive year. Flexibility is key to navigating this phase without derailing your overall plan. Phase 3, the late-stage decline, ages 80 plus. Spending typically drops by 25 to 30% in this phase, but this reduction often comes too late to offset earlier overspending. To avoid running out of money, control withdrawals in phases 1 and 2 so you enter this stage with sufficient resources. One effective approach is front-loading, where you plan specific spending reductions at certain ages rather than waiting for natural cutbacks. For example, a retiree who reduced discretionary spending by 10% at age 75 preserved enough funds to cover rising healthcare costs later. Speaking of healthcare, these expenses don't follow the same patterns as other costs. Budget separately for medical needs and consider long-term care insurance early to avoid skyrocketing premiums. Key takeaway: flexible planning is essential. The biggest mistake is treating all retirement years the same. A better approach divides your plan into 3 buckets. One for the first 10 years with cash and safe investments, one for growth investments for years 10 to 20, and one for long-term assets like annuities for late retirement. Social Security timing and tax strategies also shift across these phases, so adapt accordingly. The happiest retirees balance spending across all 3 phases, splurging early while safeguarding resources for later. Flexibility is the foundation of a successful retirement plan. The flexible spending solution. Here's the one strategy that solves most retirement spending problems: flexible withdrawals. Rigid budgets fail because real retirement spending isn't predictable. The 4% rule and other fixed approaches crumble when faced with actual retiree behavior: spending spikes, healthcare surprises, and market volatility. Flexible spending adapts to reality rather than forcing reality into a spreadsheet. Here's how to make it work, step by step. 1. Set a baseline withdrawal rate. Start with a 4% initial withdrawal rate from your portfolio. This serves as your foundation for annual spending. 2. Establish guardrails. Define upper and lower limits for your withdrawals, such as 3.5% to 5.5%. These guardrails allow you to adjust spending based on market performance. For example, if your investments gain more than 5% in a year, you might increase withdrawals to 4.5 to 5%. If losses exceed 10%, reduce withdrawals to 3 to 3.5%. This protects your portfolio during downturns while letting you enjoy more in good years. 3. Segment spending. Divide your expenses into essentials, housing, food, and discretionary items, travel, hobbies. In tough years, cut discretionary spending first. This ensures your basic needs are always covered while giving you flexibility to adjust. 4. Maintain cash reserves. Keep 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or cash equivalents. This prevents you from having to sell investments during market downturns, giving your portfolio time to recover. 5. Incorporate tax planning. Use market conditions to your advantage. In strong years, consider Roth conversions to reduce future taxes. In weaker years, harvest capital losses or make charitable contributions from appreciated assets. Coordinating taxes with withdrawals maximizes your financial efficiency. 6. Monitor and adjust. Use tools like New Retirement or Empower to track your withdrawal rate and portfolio value. These apps can alert you when you approach your guardrails, helping you make informed adjustments without constant stress. This approach isn't just about numbers. It's about weathering market storms with confidence. One retiree described it as having a system that keeps you calm, no matter what the market does. Instead of agonizing over every market swing, you follow clear rules. Spend a little more when your portfolio grows, a little less when it shrinks. Real retirees show how this works. A couple who retired with $1.2 million in 2015 adjusted their withdrawals based on market performance. After a 12% market gain in 2016, they withdrew 4.5%, $54,000. Following a market drop in 2018, they reduced to 3.5%, $42,000. By 2023, their portfolio had grown to $1.3 million despite withdrawals, thanks to their flexibility. Studies back this up. Retirees who adjust withdrawals by just 10% during bad years improve portfolio survival rates by 25%. Cutting spending 15% during the first 2 years of a market crash can leave portfolios 80% larger after recovery compared to rigid plans. The key is balance. Limit annual spending changes to 10 to 15% to avoid dramatic swings while still protecting your portfolio. Flexible withdrawals let you adapt to life surprises while staying on track for long-term success. What the 5 million retirees got right. After all the warnings about retirement spending pitfalls, let's look at what actually worked. The JP Morgan study revealed clear patterns among retirees who navigated these challenges successfully. These weren't people with magical portfolios or incredible luck. They followed specific strategies anyone can replicate. The most successful retirees shared a key trait: flexibility. They adjusted their spending based on market conditions and personal needs. For example, when markets dropped, they trimmed discretionary expenses temporarily. When portfolios grew, they allowed modest splurges. This adaptability proved far more effective than rigidly sticking to a fixed withdrawal rate. Another critical factor was maintaining cash reserves. Retirees who kept 2 to 3 years of living expenses in safe accounts avoided selling investments during downturns. One couple retired in 2007 with $1 million. When the 2008 crash hit, they relied on their cash cushion for 18 months, allowing their portfolio to recover by 2010, while others who sold low never regained their losses. Healthcare planning also stood out. Successful retirees prepared for worst-case scenarios by funding health savings accounts or purchasing long-term care insurance early, when premiums were more affordable. One retiree accumulated $85,000 in her HSA by age 65, which covered her medical costs for the first decade of retirement. Diversified income streams provided stability. Many retirees supplemented portfolio withdrawals with rental income, part-time work, or annuities. For instance, a former teacher earned $15,000 annually tutoring online, which paid for travel without touching her investments. Another couple's rental property covered their healthcare costs. Successful retirees also planned for irregular expenses. They anticipated big-ticket items like home repairs or car replacements by maintaining separate savings funds. One couple saved $400 monthly for 15 years, building a $72,000 home maintenance fund to handle major projects stress-free. Tax planning played a pivotal role. Many retirees optimized their strategies by doing Roth conversions during low-income years or timing IRA withdrawals and charitable contributions to minimize taxes. One couple saved $12,000 annually by carefully managing these moves. Finally, they treated their retirement plan as a living system. Instead of rigid rules, they used guardrails, spending up to 5% of their portfolio in good years, but cutting back to 3.5% after losses. This approach balanced discipline with flexibility, ensuring they neither underspent out of fear nor overspent recklessly. The common thread? Successful retirees embraced adaptability. They prepared for surprises, adjusted to changing circumstances, and stayed consistent with their strategies. Their success wasn't about complexity. It was about staying proactive and flexible. By adopting these behaviors, you can build a retirement plan that weathers any storm while letting you enjoy the journey. Your action plan based on real data. Here's how to turn everything we've learned from 5 million retirees into action. The data shows most retirement plans fail because they ignore real spending patterns. You can fix yours starting today with these concrete steps. 1. Calculate your real retirement spending needs. Take your current annual expenses and add 25% for the first 5 to 7 years. Then add another 15% for healthcare and unexpected costs. For example, if you think you'll spend $60,000 annually, plan for $85,000 initially. This aligns with what real retirees actually experience, not theoretical averages. 2. Build cash reserves for 2 to 3 years of expenses. This helps you avoid selling investments during market downturns. Keep this money in high-yield savings or short-term bonds, safe but accessible. One retiree in the study weathered the 2008 crash by living off cash for 18 months instead of selling at the bottom. 3. Segment your spending. Separate essentials like housing and food from discretionary expenses like travel and hobbies. When markets drop, cut discretionary spending first. Retirees who do this recover faster than those making across-the-board cuts. Use apps like Inab or Mint to track these categories. 4. Adopt flexible withdrawal strategies. Replace the rigid 4% rule with guardrails. Withdraw 3.5% to 5.5% of your portfolio annually. After gains, take 5%. After losses, drop to 3.5%. This protects your portfolio during downturns. One couple, using this approach, grew their $1.2 million portfolio despite withdrawals by adapting to market conditions. 5. Plan for healthcare shocks. Open an HSA if you're still working and max it out. If retired, set aside $20,000 to $30,000 specifically for medical surprises. Research long-term care insurance early. Premiums are cheaper in your 50s. One retiree's $85,000 HSA covered all medical costs for a decade. 6. Optimize Social Security timing. If you can wait until age 70, you'll receive 32% higher payments, which can cover late retirement costs. Use savings to bridge the gap if needed. A widow in the study increased her monthly check from $1,800 to $2,900 by delaying benefits. 7. Consider part-time work. Even 10 hours a week earning $15,000 annually reduces portfolio withdrawals when it matters most. A retired teacher tutors online, funding travel without touching investments. The data shows this reduces failure rates by 30%. 8. Stress test your plan. Use tools like New Retirement or FireCalc to model worst-case scenarios, such as market crashes early in retirement or spending 30% more in the first 5 years. Adjust your plan until it survives these tests. 9. Prepare for irregular expenses. Create separate savings buckets for home repairs, car replacements, and family needs. Automate monthly contributions. $300 for home maintenance, $200 for car costs. One couple's $400 monthly home fund grew to $72,000 over 15 years, covering major projects. 10. Review your asset allocation. As retirement nears, shift enough to safer assets to cover 5 to 7 years of withdrawals. This prevents forced stock sales during crashes. Many successful retirees use a bucket strategy: cash for short-term needs, bonds for medium-term, and stocks for long-term growth. Now assess your current plan. Does it account for spending spikes, healthcare surprises, and market volatility? If not, start adjusting today. Begin by calculating your real spending needs or building cash reserves. Even $500 monthly adds up fast. Then explore flexible withdrawal tools and stress test your numbers. The most successful retirees aren't those with perfect plans. They're the ones who adapt. Take one step today. Small actions compound into major security, ensuring your retirement is as resilient as possible. The one question you must ask your financial advisor. Here's the one question that reveals whether your financial advisor understands real retirement spending. How do you account for spending volatility and sequence risk in retirement plans? This question cuts through the sales pitch and shows if they're using outdated models or real data. Most advisors still rely on smooth spending projections that ignore the 20 to 30% spikes and drops actual retirees experience. When you ask this, listen carefully to their answer. Good advisors will mention strategies like dynamic withdrawals that adjust to market conditions, cash reserves for 2 to 3 years of expenses, and separate planning for healthcare shocks. They'll also stress test for bad sequence scenarios and address the 3 distinct spending phases we've covered. Red flags to watch for include: 1. Straight-line spending projections. 2. No discussion of sequence risk protection. 3. Ignoring healthcare cost spikes. 4. Claims their plan works in all market conditions. 5. Inability to explain withdrawal strategy flexibility. Good advisors use tools that model real-life scenarios such as spending surges in early retirement, 25 to 40% annual spending fluctuations, healthcare cost explosions, different market return sequences. Ask to see their retirement planning software. The best programs allow input for separate spending categories: essentials versus discretionary, irregular large expenses, different inflation rates for healthcare, and actual historical market sequences. If they're just using a basic calculator, that's a sign to keep looking. Some advisors specialize in alternative approaches like bucket strategies, cash for short-term, bonds for medium-term, stocks for long-term, guardrail withdrawal systems, 3.5 to 5.5% ranges, or time-segmented planning for different retirement phases. These methods often align better with real spending patterns than rigid rules. Key follow-up questions to ask include: how would your plan handle a 30% market drop in my first retirement year? What spending would you cut first in a downturn? How do you plan for $20,000 plus healthcare surprises? Advisors who understand volatility will use terms like spending shocks and sequence risk, show charts of actual retiree spending patterns, and discuss multiple scenarios rather than averages. They'll also have clear protocols for market downturns. In contrast, Bad advisors often dismiss spending volatility as unimportant, claim their proprietary system solves everything, or push products without explaining how they handle real retirement risks. If they can't show real client examples of surviving bad markets, that's a major red flag. Good advisors will welcome these questions and provide clear, specific answers. They'll show you sample client plans that survived bad sequences, explain how they've adjusted strategies based on new data, and outline multiple withdrawal approaches tailored to client needs. Asking the right questions ensures you find an advisor who truly understands the complexities of retirement spending. It's not just about numbers, it's about protecting your future. Here's the hard truth. Retirement spending doesn't follow the neat, predictable path most advisors sell you. Data from 5 million retirees proves it. You'll likely spend 25% more early on, face unpredictable healthcare shocks, and experience wild spending swings year to year. Those simple retirement rules are dangerously wrong. Your plan must reflect reality, not fantasy. Guessing wrong could cost you everything. So, what's your next move? Check the links below for tools to rebuild your strategy using actual retiree data. The time to act is now, because knowing better means planning smarter. Don't wait to secure your future.